It's December what is it, 10th today?
Yep.
December 10th, 5:30 class 6, I believe it is, right? Is that right? Class 6 tonight?
Yes, it is.
And thanks for everybody thank you everybody for being on time. It's our next to last class. We have I think 4 presentations tonight and 4 next time. Or is it 8? Is it 8 or 4?
8 tonight. Yeah, 4 in the beginning, and then we'll have 4 at the end of
Oh,
class.
okay. So that's the problem. I'm never quite up to speed. So anyway, my name's Dan, and we're on to our third presentation.
Great. Take it away when you're ready, Katie.
Can you guys see it?
Yep, looks great.
Sorry, there's someone waiting.
iPhone entered.
Sorry, people are like joining in. I guess I have to accept that they're coming in. I guess I'm drawing on my screen.
Yeah,
Cool.
don't worry about that in the
Um,
background. We'll go ahead and admit them as they come in. Sorry, that is kind of a side effect of being co-host now.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so my nonprofit is actually a school called Denver Academy. Um,
Click.
oh,
Click.
oops.
There
we
you go.
A little overview is this is a private school academy. They just celebrated their 50th year of last year, but they are a elementary to high school and they help people with all different learning disabilities help normalize school for them. So this little slider here is, students at Denver County are bright individuals with varied learning profiles who choose Denver County because their approach to education is distinctive as a child. I am one of those child. I didn't get to go to Denver County, but I am someone who has 3 brain disabilities. So that's kind of why I chose to do this. So I think if I was in high school, I would love to have been able to go to the school, and I'll explain more of why. Their mission here, there's kind of 2 different sides, but y'all can read it with me. Is to inspire and empower diverse learners, including those with dyslexia, ADHD, and ADD, through student-centered, differentiated, transformative education. Our core values are individual differences, respect and responsibility, community and nurturing relationships, and the transformative power of educating. Our passion is for learning allowed students who may not thrive in traditional settings to achieve their dreams. I feel very strongly for this, as I is one of those people who didn't get to have that opportunity. They really like to make it normal for kids. They do first grade to all the way up to 12th grade. They have different buildings for each, so elementary school, middle school, and high school. And they really just tried to allow people who have those learning disabilities be able to overcome them, able to address their challenges and just educate them on that and how to learn school as having these challenges, and how to keep going. They were founded in the 1970s, so their school is a little bit older, so some of their buildings are a little bit older, and so I'll show you more of that later. Their class sizes are between 12 to 15 kids, which I think is brilliant, as sometimes with 30 or 40 class sizes in high schools can just be really overwhelming for the teacher and for kids who just feel overwhelmed with just even the class size and can't achieve very well. Like I said, their grades from elementary to high school. They're located actually 20 minutes north from where we live. I haven't been able to go there personally, but I definitely plan to, and just want to see their building and see where they're at. Their faculty is very determined to help these kids and students just learn better. Some of the classes have teachers about 6 per class, and I think that's kind of brilliant. And just the fact of one teacher having to be in charge of 30 kids can be overwhelming for that teacher because of burnout, and they can't be one-on-one with the student. And this allows students and teachers to develop relationships and be able to just help you one another and just help those students learn and grow. They have a lot of different programs to they have all the theater stuff, sports. They have about 20 plus sports in their school. So they try to make school as normal as they can for having disabilities.
There you go.
You can't
Try
not
to-
remember.
Try to click again. Let's see. There it is.
So little just impacts for just like the small impacts. They do have a 21-acre campus, and I think it's pretty cool that you can go outside and walk around just like you were in college. They kind of make it a college experience too for those who don't want to go to college or can't go to college. They have all the high-tech technologies and education systems. They really focus on the students at one-on-one basis. A little more overbroad. Oh,
Oh no.
okay. Well, I guess I can't go back. But anyways, a little bit more of
I'm so sorry.
a little bit more of impact. It's okay. I memorized it. They
There we go. Okay, sorry, y'all. Hold on. This is my fault. Okay, I'll stop touching it.
Great. This past year they had $25 million donated to help renovate their elementary school, get to build an athletic center and bring on the performing arts center. They've been doing performing arts in another building, so to be able to have this, I think is huge for them. Since they've started in the 1970s, they've had 1,700 graduates call it their alma mater. And they were also able to donate this year $1.7 million to help 125 students with tuition costs. A little background on their tuition: it is kind of expensive. It is $33,000 to $36,000 per year. That is because they are a private school and they are a nonprofit, so they're getting obviously all their funds from other organizations and companies helping them. But I think that's still great that they're able to provide financial aid and needs for some students who can't help. We also have a $11,000 tuition scholarship as well that they will assist students who need it and families who can't provide what they need. For those of you who love the numbers, here is a little something for you. I am not a number geek, but their total revenue is about 14 million. When I was doing their 990, it said 16 million, but that was last year, so maybe this just hasn't been updated since, but it's pretty close. They obviously get a lot of 90% is from their tuition. And then the bottom numbers, the fund for the Denver Academy is about 300,000. 630,000 is from their 50th anniversary that they just had this year, or I guess last year. Right, yeah, donations, but yeah, okay. Anyways. And then the 990, they scored a 17 out of 18. And due to that revenue, that's why they got a 2, because they're in the higher portion. And that's kind of why I chose Denver Academy. I feel very passionate about this type of thing and would love for high schools to know that students learn at a different pace and a different time. And so it's just really cool that some schools are able to do this and Denver Academy is able to do it. And now I'm done.
Thank you for sharing.
Katie, how did you learn about them, or how have you been involved with them in the past?
I have not. They do have some great volunteer options. So I guess to answer your first question, I kind of just stumbled across it, not looking for it. I was actually looking for a different organization. Didn't work out, and then just have no idea how it popped up on my screen. Just happened. And then their second question, volunteers, they have a lot of scholastic fairs, book fairs that you can help out, pizza lunches, field days. They actually have some parties where you decorate different things and you can help be the teacher that helps them decorate cookies for the little ones, especially the elementary school kids. So I definitely would like to volunteer at that school just to learn more and help out.
Do you know how many students they have annually?
It said about
I think it's
430,
425,
yeah,
yeah,
425 to 430 students a year. So
Yeah.
it's definitely on the lower side, but
And
We got the annual report. We can look at that.
yeah, no, I mean, I was just looking for approximate. numbers anyway. So it didn't, if I understood right, 125 of those receive some type of tuition
Mhm.
aid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No worries if we don't. We're gonna get on then to last presentation. I'm gonna go ahead and you can actually cancel your, there you go, screen share. And we have one final presentation for tonight, or I should say for the beginning of tonight, and then we'll have some more at the end. Elijah, are you ready to go?
Ariel, if I can make a suggestion, it might be better to have Hunter go first because Elijah, Isaac, and Noah are all going together and they're all on the same computer.
Fair enough. Yeah, we do have, okay. That is an excellent point. So Hunter. Hunter,
Yeah,
are
I'm
you
ready to
ready?
go.
Excellent. Okay, I'm just gonna share. Do you have anything you want to share, or should I just go ahead and share the PDF?
I was just gonna use the PDF that you guys have.
Excellent. Then everybody can see this, the table, Urban Farm. Okay.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, so this is Table Urban Farm based in Denver, Colorado. Really localized to the South Denver neighborhoods. For those of you familiar with the Denver area, kind of from Wash Park to Southampton areas and different areas there. And so yeah, they're a nonprofit that focuses on utilizing kind of people's property spaces in order to create a garden that they can use to grow different food, and which is then used as donations for a lot of different food banks and things like that, or just homeless and different houses in need for fresh vegetables and things of that nature. So it's a really cool approach. The way that they go about it is that they actually will request through different neighborhoods and stuff, um, or they open themselves up to where if you have some piece of your property that maybe you're not utilizing, or maybe you have like an area in your backyard, or you've always wanted to have a garden but you never have the time or maintenance for it, they kind of rely on people donating different plots of land basically. And then they have a team of farmers and volunteers who will create the garden, cultivate the land, keep everything in season, and do collections on the harvest. And they ask you to kind of provide basically maybe just the water for that area. And then obviously, the little strip of land that you might be using. And so it's a really cool approach to help with some of the, Denver, as well as, a lot of the other areas we're all from, has pretty high homeless issues, and obviously food is a great need. And so they have created a way to get the community involved with helping to cultivate and help nourish and grow the area. So yeah, if you want to scroll down a little bit, I'm not sure if yeah, so this is one of the things that they do is called the veggie bike, and this picture is actually taken not too far from my house. So they, when they do different harvests and things like that, they'll have these kind of community events where they will, have this quote unquote veggie bike come up, and people in the area, houses in need and things like that. It's a opportunity for them to have free vegetables or any of the harvest that they've taken from. And so it's a cool way to get the community involved, and it gets awareness with people who are from that area. So yeah, I think it's just a really cool idea that they have this kind of sector that they call the veggie bike, and they also have a for-profit arm called the Table Public House, and they host community events there, and also have they do use some of those proceeds to kind of reinvest back into their nonprofit arm in order to help with some of the overhead and costs and things of that nature. So yeah, it's really cool. The reason, or the way I heard about them, is that our next door neighbors have actually volunteered a little strip of land between the sidewalk and the road. And I was always kind of curious about it. So when day when we were all, I was next to my neighbors and we were all mowing our lawns and things like that. I asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, this is Table Urban Farm. And so, there's people that come and they'll actually do the maintenance on the garden and help with that. And then the food is, gathered and given to different food kitchens, donated, and also has opportunities for this. And just one more cool thing about the veggie bike is that I have, in my neighborhood passed it on some of the days that they've had it, and seen a lot of, people, homeless people and things like that taking advantage of it. So I've seen, with my own eyes, people getting involved and seeing that real effect. I mean, it's crazy how close we live to it all, in the neighborhood that I'm a part of. But I've come across people in, parks next to us and different things like that. And so it's just cool to see a very localized, organization doing something to kind of help out and to kind of get the community involved as well. So yeah, if you want to scroll down there, I'm trying to remember what else I had on here. Yeah, so this kind of talks about the garden space that they do. And so, they do ask, there's certain parameters they'd like to meet. Is the space, you can see there, is the space productive? Is it get good sunlight? Is it, something that's publicly available, so that, or not publicly available, but is it visible to kind of the community so people can see it and ask about it and kind of get a conversation involved? And so, yeah, we actually asked about our neighbor or our yard if there was some opportunity, and they kind of looked at some different areas, and just we didn't have a really fertile section in the house that I live in. But it sparked my interest in this organization, and so it was really cool to have some of that discussion with them. Um, and then, yeah, if you want to continue down to the next slide here. So yeah, they have some really cool opportunities just to get, people involved, as far as, obviously they do rely on volunteer help, whether it's a gardening day where people are going out to kind of initiate and set up one of the gardens, or if they have a community event where maybe they're having a big, feeding event for people in the neighborhood that are in need. So it's just, like I said, a cool environment, a cool organization that's getting the community involved with helping our neighbors who aren't, don't have access to maybe those fresh fruits and vegetables and some of those needs. And then, yeah, if you want to scroll down, I think I'll get to the, yeah, we'll keep going, get to the giving or the analysis. I think it's on there. So yeah, so they scored a 16 out of 18. And so this caused a little bit of concern for me. So I looked into it a little bit further and noticed that, that initial 16 is obviously on that one section where you're comparing management expenses and overhead to their general expenses, and saw that a big portion of that was kind of insurance that they have, and then also just the office expenses for just some of their logistics and things like that. And it was a very, very small number. And so I was kind of putting the pieces together that just as a percentage of the actual business expenses, it was higher than, maybe some of the parameters that would get a higher score in our analysis. But it was ultimately, compared to the size of the organization, it wasn't any crazy number. And so that was kind of something I felt wasn't enough to deter me from them. And also just saw that, some of their logistics, for example, their insurance is just high for them to operate as a business in the area that they're in a high crime neighborhood. And so some of those expenses kind of built up. And so that was kind of the reasoning for not getting a perfect score. And they are operating in that, in the low end of kind of that $200,000 to $300,000 revenue stream. And so they're doing a lot with what they have, but it's definitely, like I said, very localized, very small. I think it's great that they're just focusing on the needs in the area. And so that's really cool to see. So yeah, kind of wrapping it up just with the things that I had. I think it's just cool to see an organization getting involved in the community, helping to feed. Oh, sorry. And I forgot one other statistic with some of their numbers on some of the ways that they've helped. So they've donated more than 20,000 pounds of food to food banks and shelters and other programs. Obviously, it's sometimes hard to quantify production, especially when it's a garden or something like that. 'Cause any of you who've gardened know, it's hard to see like cost for return and different things like that because, it might be elements outside of your control as far as just weather and temperature. But they are doing a lot to help kind of supply a lot of these fresh needs to the food banks and shelters in the area. And then the way that they're helping people directly, like I said, with the veggie bike that we showed earlier, they've donated food to more than 600 households in need via 120 veggie bike outings. So yeah, just a cool conduit for good, but I'll leave it at that. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you for sharing, Hunter. Yeah, I appreciate the creative spirit behind this. And I think you did an excellent job of presenting. And you can see, I think you make a good case, not that necessarily that is the only thing we look at, but in the 990, you can see that they score high in certain areas, but you have good reason for why they only scored a 1 out of 3. And still, like you said, you make a cogent point that they're worth considering anyway. So I think this is a good example of something that maybe is not like right in the middle of where you want it to be, but certainly a creative organization doing some good work and understandable when they have to carry insurance in certain areas. And that's just going to be the nature of certain nonprofits or organizations in general.
Mhm. Yeah,
Any
thank you.
questions?
I got a question for Hunter. Is the veggie bike actually a bike or is it a trailer?
I think it started as a veggie bike. They've upgraded a little bit. um, to kind of, yeah, just because they'll bring it to certain areas. So I live in like Platt Park. So they
Yeah.
have it kind of, it's as you saw in that picture, it's a little bit more than a bike now, but I think it originally started as kind of a decked out bike that they were having at different community events. But yeah, so still qualifies maybe, but
It's a bike. It's a
yeah,
bike.
we'll say it's a
Thanks,
bike.
man.
It's a sled of electric bikes now. All right, you guys. Well, let's dive into some material because we have quite a bit to cover and we don't have a lot of time to do it. So this is one of our full classes are in terms of material. I'm just gonna give me 1 minute while I switch some things around so that we can see better. There we go. Let me share my screen. Everybody can see high impact generosity. Great. Okay. So we do have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to move quickly through some of these slides. So feel free to interrupt me though. As I've said before, I do want to add, create space to answering good questions, especially when you guys are curious about certain topics. This is really, let me say from kind of as an intro, this is really drilling generosity down to personal circumstances. So this class is going to be a lot more focused on personal finances for each of you guys. You guys have learned how to judge and analyze charity and analyze giving and understand some of the high elements of what is good generosity look like and what is good stewardship look like. Now we're going to take that and say, what does personal stewardship look like? So I want to say from the outset that this is going to hit very close to home and intentionally so, unapologetically so. But I want to say that I don't, it isn't the goal of this to create condemnation and heaviness, but it instead, because quite frankly, you guys, the personal financial situation of the average American, and knowing that we have Americans in this class, a lot of us are average, we're going to fall into some of the statistics here that don't look great because the average American, their personal finances are not necessarily in a great place. That said, I do not want to use this as I don't want it to come across as the time to beat ourselves up over this. I think that would be actually the wrong approach. But as I work in the financial advising business, we tell our clients, I think the first step is to create a non-judgmental analysis of my own resources. In other words, what am I spending? What am I doing with my money? Before I make judgments about, oh, I'm so bad, oh, I'm so good. I want to know like what it is that I'm doing, and I don't want the fear of what I'll find out to deter me from actually beginning that step. So we're going to dive into some, what are we, some basically understanding what are we spending our money on? Are we in debt? If we're in debt, how do we get out of debt? And how do we strategically position ourselves to be a place not only we would say maybe financially independent, but in a place where we can be generous with our finances without feeling like we're giving away tomorrow's or next month's light bill. You know what I'm saying? Are there any questions before we begin? Okay, well then, let's dive in. You guys might have heard this saying, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? I think this is anybody, show of hands, anybody heard this statement before? Can anybody come off mute and tell me who said it? Extra points, extra credit. All right, it was Benjamin Franklin in the 1700s. So basically, you guys have probably heard it before, but do you know really what it means? The idea here is basically not spending money is just as valuable as earning it. So the idea of keeping money, setting it aside, not consuming it right away, actually has a better return than money that's just spent on direct consumables. Forgive me. Okay, meaning consumables, meaning things that we like eat, spend, housing, etc., buying shoes, whatever it be. So, but interestingly enough, especially with modern markets that have evolved over the last couple of centuries, it's really been observed in the 20th century by Andrew Tobias that actually a penny saved is worth 2 pennies earned, because of some of you guys might have heard. I think the saying that's probably not really said by Albert Einstein, but some of you might have heard that he said that the compound interest is the ninth wonder of the world. But the point is, even if he probably didn't say that, the point still remains that I think he observed that rightfully so, compound interest is an incredibly powerful tool, and our modern markets allow for very much like a compounding return of investment. So we're going to get into a little bit of that tonight in the investing mentality, but I just want to lay the groundwork here to just discuss what it looks like to not live paycheck to paycheck, because having money saved up is actually going to get us not only ahead personally, but help us be able to be more effective, more efficient with our money, and more efficient with our giving. So why? Why is this? So we're not going to go into all the details, but the first one I want to highlight, one of the most important things, is taxes. Taxes are a form of federal, basically, as you guys know, you guys are familiar with the tax situation, but the idea here is that the government is spending money on our behalf for the public good, but you don't get a say necessarily in how that's spent, and that's just assumed. So basically, what most of us here probably fit in different tax categories, certainly, but generally speaking, we're just going to take an average of 25% federal, 10% state, 15% FICA, which would be the employer, and without getting into the details, basically, you're going to have about even adding this up here, 45, 50%, of your finances are going to go to taxes, right? When you include sales tax. And this is, I would say, a very conservative approach to what probably most of us would fall into in terms of the taxes that we pay finally, because this doesn't even consider many other taxes that go into the situation. So working on this concept, working on this idea, we actually see that it does take more like $8 of earnings to buy that $4 cup of coffee that we might consume on a daily basis at Starbucks. We think, oh, my paycheck, takes $4 and plan. A lot of us are working from that perspective, but it's a powerful thing to think about. The money that I'm saving, especially if I'm using it in a very financial tax savvy vehicle like an IRA account or a 401k account. When you consider saving in these types of vehicles, you're actually really benefiting from these advantage of not paying the taxes up front and able to have our money compound a lot faster. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much of it, but I do want to just open it up quickly just for questions. Does anybody not understand like what I'm going through in terms of this idea? Okay, great. So if you can really be said that honestly, like I said before, the taxes are not even half the situation in terms of why a penny is worth more when it's saved than when it's simply earned. And I get that we're using this phrase in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, but the point remains that when you don't spend money, it actually compounds and builds faster. So why is this true? Because a lot of people put purchases on credit cards. So they're actually going in the opposite direction of compounding interest. They are paying somebody else, and the credit card company or the lender is actually the one who benefits from this. In fact, if those of you who are familiar with scripture will probably be familiar with the discussion of the borrower being slave to the lender. And the point remains that even if it's not a literal slavery situation, that the borrower is beholden through contract to the lender. And if you do not pay the lender, the agreed upon amount, they are then able to basically, they own your stuff. They take it away, whether it be your property, your car, etc. And a lot of people are paying for their consumer, whether it be their auto loans or the student loans, et cetera, any kind of debt, they're paying additional money for these products in the form of interest through credit card loans or through student loans and the interest associated with them. Does this make sense? Yes. So what we want to do basically is understand that taxes, though, the form of public good, the government is spending money, obviously they eat into your ability to personally manage your finances, because the government will take that portion away and decide they should spend it on their own, and you don't get necessarily a direct say in that, although maybe an indirect say through politicians. But the point is, taxes and interest would be, even just considering those two things, radically eat into the bottom line, the net proceeds that we have to spend. So, and actually, in thinking about this, again, this is not an exact detail, but really, if you take some time to think about it, it really is more like 3 times the amount of earnings that it takes to pay for that simple purchase that we're thinking about. And again, I know that there might be some details that we're skipping along the way, but the point is here, there's a lot of things that go in behind the scenes between what you're paid, what you earn, and the amount of money that you spend. Therefore, putting money aside and actually having these laws, principles, compounding interest work in your favor will end up being, in the long run, very beneficial for not only yourself personally, but for those around you when you're able to be generous with these finances instead of just being slave to debt. So a lot of us probably have the perspective of, if I have some money in my checking account, I'm good, and I understand this perspective. But really, what I want to start suggesting to you is that we help change our mindset in terms of how we think about finances. So instead of perspectives like these on the screen, think of a lot of our purchases as costing double or even 3 times. And when you focus on what could be, in the terms of I'm sacrificing now for what could be in the future. I like the saying that Dave Ramsey, maybe you've listened to him and heard him say, Dave Ramsey suggests that you should live like no one else so that you can live like no one else. And that saying, what he means by that is, yes, you're sacrificing now. It looks radically unsexy, this idea of saving and, oh yeah, that's something I should do. But, let's be real, it's a lot more fun to spend money now. But when you consider that my future self, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years is me. In fact, I am doing them a favor by sacrificing now myself a favor that I will reap the spending money that will audio. Does everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. I don't know what happened, but I guess it just, anyway, never mind. All right, so what I want to start suggesting is thinking, I would say, from in more of a stewardship mindset or an investment mindset. So this idea of reduce your spending in order to start paying off debt. This would be the first step that we want to start working towards. And again, I don't want this to be a condemnation time, but we'll get into the details of some of the problems of debt right now. But what I like to think about this as, imagine a personal trainer that comes in. Even the greatest athletes in the world hire personal trainers, have personal trainers to help them get better. They don't use it, the words of the personal trainer saying you need to do more, you need to be better, you need to work harder, as a way to beat themselves up. Even LeBron James, as great as he is at basketball, has trainers that tell him the truth. You need to do more. You need to work harder. Here's what you need to work on. He doesn't use that as a way to like lose confidence or beat himself up. He uses that as a way to get better. And this is where I want to really approach this topic from, because I think a lot of times, again, this can be a very touchy subject when we get touching on personal finances and we feel condemnation, maybe because we aren't doing the best we can. But let's be real, none of us on this call are doing the best that we can. In fact, as my dad often said, I've never done the best I can. I can always do better. And this is the beautiful thing, is it is actually a lie to say, well, I did my best, because realistically, yeah, though I understand the saying of that, we don't want to like get into, be ridiculous in terms of how we, correct ourselves. There is a principle in the matter, a very real principle, an important principle, that I actually haven't done my best yet, because I really don't know what my best is. What if I got better, and my best will be better tomorrow? And so to say that I've done my best is in some sorts, I think, to accept defeat in the matter. And I think this would be the opposite of what we're doing here, which is a university setting. We're getting education, we're equipping ourselves with knowledge, and knowledge being power. And we will be able to make a difference personally so that we can be more generous and participate in the lifestyle that we want to have. So you've probably heard the saying from Dave, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, that cut up your credit cards. And I think this is a very good place to start. If we are currently in debt, this is not necessarily advice for everyone, but I want to say that credit cards are a form of spending power. And there's very real statistics in the sociological research, if you look into it, that spending money on credit card is incredibly easier than spending it in cash. And I know that we're now going into a cashless society, but even if you use a debit card, I think, if you're not able to control a credit card, if you're not, in other words, if you are inconsistent, I would say this, if you're rolling over consistently, credit card debt from month to month, in other words, you're not paying it off right at the end of the month and you're paying the credit card interest, I would say that the chances that you will ever get ahead, are slim to none until you pay that off. I know that that's not necessarily something we can do all in one night. So, hey, let's make goals for whatever area we are in. But if we are in the area where we're behind on our bills, getting deeper in debt, I can tell you a thing that will quickly bury you is paying 24% interest annually on a credit card debt. So if this is a place that we're at, let's analyze our situation in a non-judgmental way, first of all, and then let's analyze, hey, this is a form of power that maybe I don't have the ability to control quite yet. So let's start with practical measures of getting healthy by cutting up the things that are damaging our bottom line, namely credit cards and the interest associated with them. I know that there's a lot of attractive deals out there, and there's a lot of things, and I won't spend too much more time on this, but let me tell you that the credit card companies and their deals that they offer, it is a little bit like a gambling house. They don't play to lose. At the end of the day, if you come into a casino and you have $1 million and you play a long enough time, you will lose all of that $1 million. You don't beat out the casino house consistently. In a similar way, if credit card companies and their enticing deals are meant to get you caught up in debt, and you lose all the deals and the exceptional things that you got with them will put you further behind when you're paying 18 to 20 to 24% interest annually. Make sense? And great, for those of us who are not in this, section, this is a good exercise for us to help train others in. So consider this. I want to quickly run through debt and what it actually does, because maybe you're saying for a second, yeah, that's nice, but I've heard this, but I don't really necessarily I don't know if it hits home, but again, maybe not all of us are numbers folks, but I want to run through some of the numbers just to give you the point here. So let's consider a very common situation scenario. Credit card interest is 24% annually with a $10,000 balance, 3% minimum payment. I just looked up the numbers, and the average American has a $7,000, or average American household, I should say, has $7,000 of credit card debt and over $100,000 of consumer debt. And then I think if you take on a mortgage, it gets, I think the average mortgage is like $250,000. So it goes way up if you own a house. But point is here, this is definitely like run of the mill. And probably a good portion of us are fitting into this thing. At least we have a credit card with 24% interest on it if we read the fine print. We may or may not have the $10,000 balance, but just to go through a couple questions, what is the minimum payment per month? How would you calculate that? We won't answer these up front. We'll answer them at the end, but I want to run through the questions first. How much interest will you pay this month? Okay, so if you always pay only the minimum, how long do you think you would pay it off? In other words, if this credit card company assigns some, not random, but some arbitrary minimum that they've decided how much, and I can just like go ahead and pay the minimum. That's one of my options. How long would it take to pay off that $10,000 balance at 24% a year? And then if you reduce the spending by $200 per month, in other words, I'm going to now pay an additional $300 above the minimum, so $500 a month every month. How long would it take to pay off? So the idea here is like I'm paying an additional 200 on top of my 300 a month payment. So real quick, to the answer to the first one is basically I want to make it clear. Many credit cards have 2% or smaller minimum payment. So that minimum payment that is, by the way, arbitrarily decided by the credit card company, that's not necessarily a good thing to be like, yeah, I'm making my minimum payments, I can afford it. That's definitely not affording it. That is just simply paying an arbitrary amount that the credit card company is willing to accept no less from you. And of course, they love it and they benefit from you paying only the minimum payment, because you will realistically, if you're consistently spending as much as you earn or spending more than you earn, you'll never pay it off, right? So quickly, the 24% annual interest, 2% a month is $200. So basically, of your $300 payment, if you paid that per month, only 100 reduces the debt. Is this making sense to you guys? I know I'm going through these numbers kind of quickly, but you get the idea that most of if I have a $300 a month payment, most of it is going to interest. Only 100, 1/3 of that is going to actually reducing my debt with the credit card company. So you can see these credit card calculators online. I actually have a link here you can see from creditcards.com, and you can see an interest calculator, and you can plug in all the details of your interest rate, your interest, your balance, etc., and the minimum payment. So if you plug this in, you'll find that it'll take 25 years by making the minimum payment. So basically, you're in this for a good portion of your life. And if you add to basically, I'll explain why the minimum, like as I explained before, the minimum payment is basically not the actual payment amount. It's just simply an arbitrary amount that the credit card company has decided that you pay. And I'll go through real quickly, but basically the cash flows show here, and the principal is paid down very slowly. You can see here, $88 after 14 years. So, basically just it's the nature of, unfortunately, getting compound interest working against you. So basically, what if we stuck with the 300 minimum payment and didn't pay anything additional? We had 25, we would go 25. We would basically went from, I'm sorry, I confused this. If we actually did, I think that's actually a typo here. But at any rate, basically, yeah, the idea is it would take 25 years to pay off that debt, as we discussed. So now, if we go, what if we pay, basically we commit to a $500 payment, as we discussed originally. This was number 4 that we talked about. So what if we were making an additional $200 a month payment on top of our $300 a month? So as you can see here, we'll plug this in and we'll actually go down to 2 years, because what we're doing now is making additional $200 a month payment towards the principal. So I know we gone through a lot of numbers. I know we kind of, maybe some of that was confusing, even for me, because I think I skipped around the slide. But the point is here, paying off the principal on our debts is incredibly important towards getting out of debt. So paying the minimum oftentimes is set up by whether it's your mortgage or your credit card company, but especially your credit card company consumer debt situation will set the minimum payment very low. The nice thing about your mortgage is often amortized, meaning you have a plan to pay it off in the 15 or the 30-year mortgage that you took. So you have a very plan structured payment plan. With consumer debt, a lot of times we're adding to that consumer debt, we're taking away, we're spending more each month. It's set to basically it's not set to be a reasonable payment plan like you might assume for a mortgage. It's very set very low, like 2% payment, like we saw on the minimum payment for a credit card company. And it will take you a long time. And if you honestly, if you're spending more per month, which we can get over on this next page, we'll talk about. But basically, if you pay 500 a month each month, but then you're adding 300 a month to that same card, in other words, you're still living life, like there's still bills to pay at the end of the month. You basically never pay off your credit card. This is the point: is you will be trapped in a scenario that realistically it'll be impossible to get out of based on current circumstances. So the point is, paying towards principal is the goal that will help us get out of debt. And two, if we continue to live in debt and just pay the minimums that are given to us, we don't take responsibility for debt, we will never pay it off. And this is, I think, if we're honest, at least by statistics that we read in sociological statistics, this is the average place that a lot of us are in. So I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge, like, first of all, hey, it doesn't do any good just to beat ourselves up and then to like hide the truth away in a closet and not look at our balance statement and be like, I don't really know how much I spend, but I'm getting by somehow. I think that is an approach to, honestly, to keep ourselves trapped in financially speaking. What is incredibly important is to be charitable with ourselves, I believe, because we all start somewhere. Let's be real. Some of us didn't have education in terms of how to spend money well, and some of us inherited even bad ways of spending money from our family, from our parents, etc. Teachers, unfortunately, in schools, we're not oftentimes taught or by mentors or by family members how to really spend money well and how to live within our means. The point is, though, there is hope. You have to start somewhere. So if you have multiple credit cards, if you have debt with multiple credit cards, let's start with debt elimination strategies. Paying towards principal is an important part to start with. And there's several techniques. I don't know that anyone is necessarily better than the other in terms of like actually better, but there are different styles depending on preferences. Some will say start with this idea of paying the highest interest first. So, for example, or the highest principal first, the highest balance first. So, for example, if I have 5 credit cards, I might consider paying down the lowest balance to get rid, to consolidate that debt, or I might pay down the highest interest, which would be, the one that's costing me the most interest per year. Point is, there's different techniques. I'm going to suggest just a common, easy one. If you don't have another one, you're trying to figure out what should I pay off first, maybe just focus on this first tactic. If the interest rates are pretty close to each other, in other words, one is not drastically over the other, in other words, they're like 18 to 24%, which is generally speaking where credit cards land, pay down the lowest balance. Just pick one and pay it down and say, as soon as that's paid down, I'm cutting it up. Better yet, call the credit card company, actually close the account, just so that there's not any chance of fraud there, or an open account for you that will affect your credit in the future. Should add that line. And then 2, if maybe a second strategy that you can consider, if you have 2 credit cards and one is much higher, like I was mentioning before, pay off that one first. Why? Because that is costing you the most in interest per year. Does this make sense, guys? I want to check in with you guys just to see. Yeah, I think, okay. I think a lot of us, have maybe heard some of this stuff before, but I want to I want to create space to say as well, if you guys have questions about this, I do this for a living in terms of like financial advising and giving financial counsel. So I'm more than happy to help you guys in terms of if you have any questions about this stuff, even if you want to discuss some of some things with me personally, I'd be more than happy. You guys have my email. It's ariel.bolan@gmail.com. Also, if you want, I can, we can set up a time to have a phone call, etc. Because I have a passion to help people in this area. And I recognize that, this is something that a lot of us struggle with. And all of us are on some spectrum between 1 and 10 of like financial health. And very few of us, if any, are, I think, could, if we were honest, call ourselves a perfect 10, including myself. So I'm definitely a fellow practitioner, also walking the journey as well, that I'd love to help, fellow mankind in this. And I recognize that some of this is maybe a little too personal to share or ask a question here in the class format. So having said that though, I do want to then discuss a little bit more of the reasons why behind this debt. So now we talked about the practicals. Clearly, there's a lot of debt. Why are we in debt? What causes this? Basically, Proverbs from Scripture gives us a couple of insights into this. Basically, a couple of proverbs that I want to draw your attention to are this idea of loving pleasure. So whoever loves pleasure, Proverbs says, will become poor. Whoever loves wine and olive oil will never be rich. And I think maybe some of us might have read this before and thought, I don't really have that much passion for wine or olive oil, so maybe I'm good. I think what is really emphasized here, though, at least in the times that Proverbs was written, is this is the Netflix and the iPhone expenditures of their day. This is the stuff that brought pleasure to folks. This is the stuff that was, the daily consumables and the nice stuff that people would spend their money on. This is maybe even the Gucci and the Prada, or the depending on your taste level, the flat screen TV and the PlayStation. The idea here is, if loving these things is not necessarily bad, but you have to be honest with yourself that spending money on these things does not bring any kind of return whatsoever. They're not assets per se. And I know that there might be some exceptions, and I'm not talking about the exceptions here in terms of those who buy sneakers and sell sneakers, or buy purses and sell purses as a business. But generally speaking, when you buy them to enjoy them personally, they're not making a return. So you, over time, will inevitably become poor if your assets, if your income is not greater than what you're spending on these products. So that means if you're going into debt to take on these products, you're immediately in the red. You're behind. You are on the path to poverty. You will stay on that path until you decide to make decisions otherwise. And again, this is not a place to beat ourselves up, but this is a place to understand my decisions have direct consequences and will lead me down towards certain paths, as Scripture, if you're a reader of Scripture, makes very clear. The plans, here on the second proverb I want to draw ourselves to, is the plans of the diligent surely lead to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. So the second proverb, I think, really highlights the opposite side of the truth that I want to point out, that making decisions, good decisions, actually lead to abundance and prosperity. And as Dave Ramsey has put it, live like no one else so that you can live like no one else. What he's saying is, if you sacrifice now and you live wisely, like what he means by like live like no one else, in other words, the average person is not living wisely with their finances. Later on, you will buy PlayStations and Gucci and Prada in abundance, and you will be able to not only buy it for yourself, but buy it for others and live very generously. I've seen people who have experienced the fruit of this. They live diligently, they live wisely, they live within their means, and they understand finances, and they basically take a stewardship mindset, where what I would call a stewardship mindset is this idea of, I'm stewarding finances on behalf of someone else. So they take this idea that I have to be accountable for everything I spend and spend it wisely, but they then are able to reap the benefits of working for a very powerful, wealthy benefactor, right? So they're stewarding finances on behalf of their benefactor, and they recognize that if they spend these assets wisely, they will be able to live off of the fruit of that and enjoy that. So I want to encourage you guys that it's not just about sacrificing. It's not just about punishing yourselves. It's about living with a purpose, understanding that my decisions today will affect me tomorrow. And I, just as I would want to work out and eat healthy to live long, I want to work out, so to speak, financially and live properly within my means so that I can enjoy the benefits of a long and good life. As Jesus said, I've come to bring life and life to its fullest. And I think if you look at what Jesus talked about, if you follow Jesus and you're a reader of the New Testament, you'll understand that outside of the kingdom of God, Jesus, his two greatest topics that he talked most about during his time here on earth was number one was the kingdom of God, number two was money. And I think for very good reason, not because he was a money grubber, but because he understands how you handle your money basically is how you handle everything in life. And he even says clearly on one point that who will give you really important stuff to manage if you can't even manage your personal material goods. Basically Jesus is saying that I think people are the most important resource there is in the universe, and that God says that one day we'll manage, I think, people, if I understand the scriptures right. And he's saying if you want to properly steward people, first learn I think what he's trying to get at is he says, learn in the sandbox where the stakes are low with money and with stuff and possessions. If you learn to manage and steward those really well, then we'll get outside the sandbox, so to speak, and really learn the big stuff and the important stuff. And I think that's ultimately what God is, again, for those of us who take seriously the discipleship, following God and developing virtue in your life. I think this is one of the single greatest lessons I've learned in my life, is that how I handle my finances, really that same virtue of stewardship, and generosity and wisdom actually leads to like every area of my life. So I want to go through again quick reason why I think so many of us in the United States are in debt. I think there is a strong culture of materialism. Just for definition purposes, for those of you who don't know what materialism is, basically has a variety of meaning in different contexts. So I want to make sure that's clear. But in this context, we're basically just talking about this idea for material possessions. All right. So materialism being I desire material things like food, money, or food, purses, PlayStations, cars, whatever, houses, whatever it be, whatever your thing is. We want things in this culture because we have the ability to buy a lot of stuff. We're the wealthiest people in the history of mankind as a nation, and so we, I think, have developed this insatiable hunger for more. And some of that has served us well as we've developed and grown in our ability and for technology, et cetera. But I think a lot of us acknowledge it's gotten out of control, this insatiable hunger, especially in the area of buying and owning possessions. So, basically, according to California psychologist Alan Kilner, feelings of satisfaction and happiness decline among people driven by a need for financial success and fancy possessions. I think this is counter to what a lot of us might believe, at least intuitively, that if we just simply had more. I mean, how many of us are guilty, for a second, I just show of hands, how many of us are guilty of, myself included, coming up with something like the saying, if I just had, $10,000 more of income a year, I could handle all my bills. Have you guys ever thought that? Like, man, if I was just paid another $4 an hour, I could bring in that, I would actually cover everything, right? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I know that I'm making more than I did when I first started at my first job. And interestingly enough, that my expenses, I've noticed, have just grown to meet my income in a lot of ways. And thankfully, again, I think we've I think that there's opportunity for that if you're using your finances well. But in fact, I want to highlight a book for you guys that I think is if you guys are interested in more reading, a book that really influenced my view of my expenses was a book by Jeff Schinneberger called More or Less. And basically, I'll talk more about it at the end, but he basically makes the argument that, hey, there's an opportunity to spend all kinds of money, on different stuff. And ultimately, your possessions won't make you happy, or spending a certain amount isn't sociologically linked with happiness. In fact, once you get above 100,000 US dollars, they say there's absolutely no correlation between more money and increased happiness. Interestingly enough, for you guys who are interested in sociologically speaking, the happiest people in the world, statistically speaking, are those who are just above poverty. In other words, those who have enough to pay for food and pay for basic. And we're talking about poverty, like just above, like basically food and housing is essentially all that's covered in there when you're just above poverty. Those who have enough to meet those needs are the happiest people on the planet. And it's interesting enough, there are exceptions. Don't get me wrong. There's happy people who are wealthy, and there's happy people all in between, middle class, etc. But what happens is we see correlation, maybe a little bit of correlation between happiness and money, but that quickly goes away when you are able to meet your basic needs. Certainly people who are in dire poverty, who are starving to death, are not happy. That much is assured. But I would say that most people in the West, most people, especially in the United States, are not in that place. And so interestingly enough, counterintuitive, that happiness actually, the feeling of happiness and satisfaction, as Alan Kanner points out, among people who are driven for financial success and fancy possessions, the happiness actually goes down in those people. So basically what we find is that people who want to buy a lot of stuff end up comparing themselves and to others who have that stuff, whether it be close friends, family, and stuff. They basically are comparing themselves to them and find themselves with less. They enjoy their stuff less. And ironically enough, when they dedicate themselves to working to pay for all of their consumer spending, they end up being starved for deeper connections. They lose sight of things that really do produce happiness in people, which is relationships with close friends and family, these things that provide the deeper meaning in our lives. So I want to conclude here by saying basically that money and possessions, while incredibly important for providing for our daily needs, really are not correlated with happiness in the long run. And so this idea of just getting a little bit more money without actually defining what enough is, as this is the whole point of Jeff Schinneberger's book, More or Less. He says basically what we need to do is define what is important for us to have. What is going to make me happy? The more or less, you decide. And then meeting it there, how many pairs of shoes do I actually need to be happy? And then committing to not having any more than that, actually, he says, leads to greater happiness. And he's got a whole argument in his book, and I think it's a pretty powerful book. It made a big impact on me in terms of understanding, okay, I need to be in charge of deciding what is enough for myself, because otherwise my stuff will decide for me. In other words, I don't make the decision, and I'm controlled by this inner hunger and desire for more, because that unfortunately kind of becomes the inevitability if we don't decide and take responsibility for the decision for ourselves. All right, any questions there? Okay. Well, you guys probably have heard this saying before. Money is the root of all kinds of evil. So, have you guys heard of that? Any show of hands? Anybody heard that before? Anybody know where it's from? Anybody want to come off mute?
It's from the Bible, I think, and it's isn't it the love of money is the root of all evil?
Yes, excellent student. Yes. So it is from the Bible. It's like kind of from the Bible. It's actually just a shortened version of what's really about it. So it comes from the New Testament. I don't have the whole verse up here, but it's actually, you're right. Jesus says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So the point is here, Jesus is getting at this idea that if you love money, you inevitably become a servant to it. You become, instead of it serving you, you end up becoming a slave to things that honestly are not good masters. And Jesus has a lot to say about those who serve what he calls mammon, being the god of money, and those who serve God themselves, is saying you can't serve two masters. This idea is you will inevitably love one and hate the other. And so the point is, money is not evil in itself, but loving money will make you a slave to it. As Timothy says in the New Testament, people who want to get rich fall into temptation and trap into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So we honestly understand that I think a lot of us intuitively understand that money won't make us happy. Yet I think there is such a strong pull in our culture towards glorifying and idolizing those who are wealthy and those who are famous, those are celebrity. We have what's some of you might have heard that's called that we live in a celebrity culture where we make celebrities even of our leaders, our political leaders or our pastors or, Christian leaders. I mean, we make celebrities and we put people up there and we say, this is what I'm going towards. And I think it's easy in that kind of culture, even if we understand, yes, money won't make me happy. It's still, if we're not fully in tune with our understanding beliefs, we'll find, I think, the culture feeding us these ideas and ideologies that say, if I just had more, I'd be happy. Look, so and so, he looks happy. Look at him on Instagram or look at him on whatever social media you use. They look so happy. And this idea of like, if we are not defining these things for ourselves, we end up becoming slave to the temptation and trap, as Timothy says, trapped into so many foolish things and harmful desires that ultimately will lead to our ruin and destruction. So, basically, Timothy, as I pointed out here, that points out the temptation that is a trap. So, can credit cards be used effectively? The answer is yes, absolutely. And for some people, credit cards might not be an effect. Credit cards might not be an effective form of. Yeah, sorry. My apologies. I misread that. But basically, credit cards are for some an effective use of money management. I don't think that they're a negative thing in and of themselves. I, full disclosure, use credit cards myself. I don't carry balances month to month. I make sure that everything, instead of the auto pay of the minimum balance, I have the auto pay for the full balance so that I will never get stuck paying interest. And I carefully manage my finances to make sure there's always enough to pay for that. But I find them, for myself, a convenient way to transfer money from myself to the business that I want to pay for whatever it is that I want to buy. So the questions that we have to ask ourselves are we in a financial place and a disciplined financial place to be able to pay off our bill at our complete balance, not just the minimum payment, our complete balance at the end of every month? If the answer is no, I'm going to suggest that credit cards are not a good spending tool for you. Why? Because the sociological evidence shows that psychologically speaking, it is easier to spend money on a credit card. It is less painful to spend money that I'm not seeing from a credit card than paying somebody in cash. When I have the physical process of handing money over to somebody, I'm actually going to be I'm going to feel that, psychologically speaking, as more painful than pulling some out of some balance that's kind of esoteric to me. Does that make sense to you guys? Is there anybody who wants to disagree with that? I'm certainly happy to talk through some of the questions you guys have. But do you understand how I came to that conclusion? Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I guess sorry, if the audio doubles, that might be an issue on our end.
Otherwise, it's good on my end. No
Okay,
problem.
cool. For me, like, I guess cash it's never been my primary source of spending. I've always kind of just either used my debit card or credit card, and it's worked out for a while. But because it's been like my whole life, I just view my debit card as like my primary I guess savings, my block of like income or whatever. And so when I have a 10 lying around, I almost like forget about it. And I've actually lost more money in cash than anything else in the whole world. And so for whatever reason, cash just hasn't worked for me. Um, I don't know.
Mm,
Do you have any recommendations for that? Because it just feels almost fake for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't understand.
yeah. No, that's fair point. Um, and I think that for those of us who have grown up in a digital age where digital money is such a norm now, and any form of physical representation, whether it be cash or anything else that we've used in the past, is kind of a thing of the past. Um, you know, the basic answer I have for you is that yes, there are tools um, that we can tools of organization, including like an envelope payment system. I would say keeping money in different envelopes is a one that you'll learn if you. I'll suggest this at the end, but Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University suggests using to pay the different bills that you have in your. So you have spending money and you have this, and I think that form of organization is incredibly powerful, incredibly simple. But honestly, some of the most simple things in life should not be overlooked as some of the most powerful disciplines. And so and there's many other forms, including getting a safe or getting other things. But I understand that there are downsides to carrying cash that maybe it's maybe for you, it's easier to carry one simple card than it is to carry a lot of bills. And it's, you're not like as likely to lose your credit card, or if you do lose your credit card, it's not as punishing because simply call a credit card company and have that card canceled, as opposed to losing cash is, 100% punishing because you lose all that cash and you lose all out on that. So I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to be very open, unapologetically so, that there are downsides to holding cash that don't exist. Those downsides don't exist on the credit card side. That said, the downsides to even losing some of that money, I would say, for many of our lives, for many of us who are, quite frankly, slaves to our credit card, I would say it's much harder because of the nature of cash. You just can't get into debt with cash as easily. I mean, you can take out loans, but again, that's different. Because you literally cannot spend money you don't have with cash. It quite frankly has such an upside if you're talking about purely just the battle between debt and getting out of debt. For those who don't have the discipline to pay off a credit card, or using a debit card, I think is maybe a happy medium, in the sense of it is easier to spend money on a cashless debit card than it is the cash. In other words, you won't have the pain of pulling out the money and giving it over from your wallet. That said, you cannot go into debt with a debit card. You'll get, as you guys know, if you've ever overdrafted your checking account, you get punished by $35 or whatever that fee is that your bank charges you for overdraft. So thank you for bringing up that point, Micah. Does that kind of satisfy your question, or do you have something more that you want to follow up on?
No, it actually totally does. I think I'll probably start pulling out my money and like keeping it in savings, like in envelopes and stuff. Because I've heard of the Dave Ramsey stuff before. I read his book in like junior high or whatever. But I think that would kind of mentally take that money out of my checking account, if that makes sense, out of my spendable money, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just putting it into savings, because it is just easier to spend it when you see the number, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
That being said, I think I'll still continue to spend on my credit card and then just pay it off every month. I've been doing that for years now, and it's been
Mm.
working out for me. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and quite frankly, we don't have time to get into all my personal finances, which wouldn't be appropriate here too. Now that I say that out loud, but um, just very practically, quickly to in answer to your questions, I use a form of a budget system where I do use cashless basically for all my expenses. So I use credit cards for the primary purchase, because there's a form of protection there with a credit card company. Also, if somebody gets my credit card information, for example, they don't have my debit card information to drain my debit balance. And there's a certain level of protection there that I appreciate from the credit card company. And then I pay the credit card company from my bank account. So at the end of the day, it's me spending only the cash that I have, because I then have a very disciplined, spreadsheet approach to like our our expenses, et cetera. I monitor our expenses to make sure everything's legit and we're living well below our means, and that we're able to not only have money to spend for ourselves, but to give money away, et cetera. And I find that the most effective form of budgeting and living for me and my wife. And that's something that I've not always done. I actually grew up at one point in my life using something more of the envelope approach and the cash approach. And I went through Dave Ramsey's financial piece. And so I think it's a matter of finding what really works well for your current season, because what do you have the discipline to do? And I'll share a practical example again from sports. Quite frankly, what I'll use LeBron James again, is a famous basketball player. What he is working on right now in the sport of basketball, what his coaches are telling him to do, and what his trainers are telling him to do, quite frankly, would not apply to a lot of us, even if we do play the sport of basketball, and certainly would not apply to us who have no basic understanding of basketball whatsoever. In other words, to get to the level of LeBron James and the advice that he's giving out to himself and he's thinking about, or what his trainers are giving to LeBron James, is going to be totally different to someone like me that's like a novice basketball player, grew up, and it's certainly even more so to the person who doesn't even understand the basic rules of basketball. You get my point here. It's to say, for some of us, the cash approach is going to be what we need to start with. And I would say we can work towards other methods as we become more excellent in our stewardship of our finances. But if we find that we're getting out of sync with our finances, we need to go back to the basics, just as LeBron James does for basketball. I guarantee that he's still practicing the basics and coming back to them, because if he forgets how to shoot a layup, it doesn't matter what all the other stuff he would do. His game will suffer. Again, I find these sports analogies helpful. I hope that take some of the fear and condemnation out of this idea of going back to cash as, it seems so countercultural, and it really is countercultural to our culture that the average American is in debt, using credit cards and spending more than they earn. That's the average. That's more than 50% of Americans. So it's certainly using cash and then not spending money when you run out of it is the exception. Don't get me wrong. You're going to be in the lower percentile. Less than half of people like you. Certainly less than half people use cash still in our society. But I think there are good principles there that can be, again, they're basics to financial stewardship, which is don't spend more money than you earn. Be very aware of how much money you earn and be very aware of how much money you spend. I think that would be the basics. And then if we can master those, we can work more into these other forms of managing our budget with credit cards, etc. Okay. So if there's no other questions, I'll just open it up there real quick, but I do want to get through some of the other, we do have quite a bit to cover still. This is a deep and long section. So I apologize that we're moving so quickly. All right. But anyway, so basically I want to just quickly cover some of the most important basic things about a budget. So the idea here, as I mentioned before, as I alluded to before, write down your monthly income. Start with you can start with gross, but then or you can start with net. The idea of like your gross meaning the money before taxes, or you can take taxes out of that, but just make sure if you're taking the gross that you budget for taxes as well. Then write down your monthly expenses. So you're basically, what you're doing is you're subtracting your monthly income with your monthly expenses, and then write down non-monthly expenses. Again, taxes, etc., holidays, travel, entertainment, stuff that doesn't happen on a regular monthly basis. So write these things down, as many as you can, and try to track those as well, because the less surprises you have, it will be the more dialed in you can become, the more efficient you can become. It's these surprises, even if they're small surprises, that really cause a lot of stress. It's that last minute test, if you guys are students, that you didn't study for, right? If you're ready for the test and you're like, oh, it's 2 weeks away, I studied on a regular basis, that test is not very stressful. It's the one where you showed up or you wake up that morning, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't study for it. These cause unnatural stress, like over the top stress compared to what the actual problem was. The problem was it's a simple test. If you had been ready for it, and the same way, it's simple car registration fee or property taxes or insurance premiums. These things, if you're regularly tracking them, you understand, you won't be surprised. And even better, if you can actually have an account that's just designated for like a slush fund or a slash an emergency fund, it actually helps because it then creates a buffer for mistakes that we all make. Sometimes we don't count on getting sick. Sometimes we don't count on all these things happening, that if we do have some type of additional funds, emergency fund set aside, it helps to cushion when we have these surprises. But the point is, write down your monthly income, write down your monthly expenses, write down your non-monthly expenses, add all the expenses together, subtract from the income. Make sure you're living within your means, as they say. So this is a very simple budget, and you guys can Google these online and get a quick start budget. I encourage you guys, if you haven't, if you're not disciplined, if you do have trouble with money, get on a simple budget. There are so many different varieties. Look through them, choose one that suits your fancy. There are, I would say very few wrong ways to budget. Obviously, if it's a broken budget, you don't want that. But I can't think of what that would look like off the top of my head. But make sure it basically is doing what we talked about above, income, expenses, and making them match up. And spend every dollar on your budget. What I mean is your hypothetical budget, make sure every dollar is accounted for. At the end of the day, there's nothing left over. You want to make sure that even if, the point is you're going to, in your budget, have a point for emergency fund budget and savings, etc. the future. So make sure that that's a category as well, because you want to make sure that you're putting money, every dollar is accounted for. All right. Any questions there? I don't think budgeting is nearly as complicated as some people make it out to be. And I think a lot of us have this understanding, oh my gosh, it'd be such a terrible thing. Start simply, start in a non-judgmental way. Analyze, what am I spending right now? No judgment. What am I spending? Do I even know that number? Do I even know X amount of dollars are being spent every month? If I don't know, this is just a recipe for disaster, because again, how is any pro athlete going to get better at his game? How is anybody going to improve their health if they don't even know what they eat? Are you eating healthy food? Well, I guess, I don't know. And the point is, I don't think we're going to get healthy in budgeting until we understand what we're spending and what we're making. So again, I mentioned several, there's many budgeting tools online. There's even apps. Unfortunately, this Mint one on the right, if you guys heard the news, is going away, has gone away. I think it's going away in January 1 of this next year. So that's no longer pertinent. It was a brilliant app that I used as well. And I think a lot of people are upset. But the point is, there's a lot of simpler ones that do track the basic, spending through credit cards. If you use
What
credit
happened
cards.
to Mint?
Unfortunately, they canceled it into it. And the short answer is over money. It just didn't make them money. And that's unfortunately kind of been the reason that there's not been a consistent budgeting app ever to survive more than a couple of years. Yeah, very unfortunate. Because even with our clients, we recommend Mint for a lot of basic budgeting. Like I said, I used it myself. So very sad, but such is life. There are other ones that you can. Mint was just for those of you who don't know, was a way to automate spending. It automatically track these things. You can still do it manually and on a much simpler basis. It's fairly simple and doesn't require much time to do. Any questions? Okay. So I just want to quickly go through and say come back to what we talked about before. 3 pennies. Basically, this idea of saving money. It's no joke. So the man basically, the month one, if a man gets his credit card bill and decides to pay $35 a month to pay it off, he pays $35 from his bank account. How much did he actually have to earn? After that taxes that we said, he has to earn $63. Does that make sense? Because all the taxes go away. So he's paying that debt off. So he has $35 of debt that he's paying every month, but it's actually costing him $63 because 42% of that goes to taxes. At 18% interest, because he's paying interest on the $35, $15 of 35 is interest. So 63 is now down to $20 in debt. You guys get the idea. It quickly becomes pennies that you're actually paying off. Debt is incredibly hard master. and it will, like, every dollar has to be accounted for. And again, for those of us who are in debt currently, it's not, and you know, it's not a hopeless future. We just have to start, just like the road to good physical health requires us to document and understand what we're currently eating, what we're currently doing for exercise, getting on a plan to get healthier over time. We can get on say a financial diet, so to speak, or a financial fitness plan that can work us back into financial fitness. So I want to basically talk about, in conclusion here, and the final thoughts, I want to basically share a quote here. You know, it's interesting. Somebody once said that it's easy to buy a $30,000 car. Basically, just buy a $20,000 car with 60-month payments. And if you guys do, especially in current auto loans, you know, maybe a few years back, some of you might have bought a car when there was very low interest rates and you're not paying much in interest. But right now, current interest rates for most cars, you're going to be paying I would say on average, you know, maybe an extra 30%. You know, it might be less than that. Maybe it's only 10%, 20%, but even that, you know, it adds up when you're doing every purchase on payment. And like I said before earlier in this class, the average household has $100,000 of consumer debt, including auto payments, student loans, etc., that they're paying interest on all that. So you want a way to make your dollar go nowhere, take on a lot of debt. That is a guaranteed way to make sure that you get less bang for your buck, so to speak. Even if you ended up getting those things on good deals and savings, if you bought it on debt, it just adds to the price of what you paid for. Like whether that's a flat screen TV, a car, or a house, it just simply is going to cost you more in the end than what it's actually worth. So, basically, I do want to leave time for us to go through, because we don't have too much more time for our presentations tonight. So I want to share a couple of books with you guys, and I also want to share that what the email that we'll be sending out at the end of this class will have a link to this video here. And it's to Dave Ramsey. For many of you are familiar with him. He has a lot of good wisdom on when it comes to financial success. You know, you don't have to agree with everything he says, because some of the things he says I think are for shock value and maybe rightfully controversial. That said, he's got a lot of wisdom and a lot of good common sense. I encourage you guys to watch this video, and we'll send it out we'll send it out in the email after class with the link in it. So, and the other thing I wanted to recommend to you guys before we get into presentations is a couple of books if you're interested in further reading. Certainly Dave Ramsey and his whole, he's got probably at least half a dozen books that I can think of right now. Financial Peace, Total Money Makeover, etc. And his Financial Peace University, it's a class that you can go through similar to Giving University class format. You have to pay for that one. There's no generous benefactor like there is with Giving University to cover the cost of the class here, but it is worth the investment. I've done it. It's a great class. I encourage you guys, if you're wanting to learn more about personal finance, managing your funds, encourage you guys to look into that. The other books that I recommend profoundly impacted me, Randy Alcorn's Money, Possessions, and Eternity. It's a little bit thicker book, maybe a little bit more robust than some of you are able or used to reading. And I would then recommend The Treasure Principle, also by Randy Alcorn. So he has two books on the same subject. Treasure Principle is a easier read, but a lot of good content. I haven't read The Treasure Principle personally, but I know that's related to his book, Money, Possessions, and Eternity, and very similar and just broken down in shorter stuff. But Money, Possessions, Eternity really helped me understand this idea of stewardship mindset rather than ownership mindset. In other words, what I have actually is not mine to spend in any way that I want to, not if I ultimately believe that I'm stewarding funds on behalf of someone else. And me personally, I follow God, and I'm saying that ultimately I believe that everything I have in my life is from God and it's given to me by God and is for me stewarding on God's behalf. Of course, I get to benefit from that if I steward it well, but nonetheless, I'm going to be accountable for every dollar that I spend, no matter if I think it's mine or not. Anyway, and the other one that I recommended earlier was Jeff Shinnebarger's More or Less. I think that's an excellent book as well. And on the topic specifically of defining in your life what is enough. All right. And in our final time there, I just want to, first of all, I'll go back to our list of presentation givers. Give me 1 minute. I think we skipped Elijah because we have a number of people with you, Elijah, Isaac, and Noah, that are all going to give your presentations back to back. But Elijah, would you like to kick us off or kick the three of you guys off?
I think Noah's gonna go first for us, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And is it going to be this? Okay, no, I see Noah's here as well. Noah, would you like me to share my screen, or did you want to share yours?
Can you share your screen?
Okay. Yep, absolutely.
All
Let me
right.
just pull it up here. Noah Upton. Okay. There you go. Can you see okay?
All right. Yeah. All right. So I chose St. Vincent de Paul. How do I scroll down here?
I can scroll. You just let
Oh,
me
you
know.
can scroll? Cool.
Yep.
Let me see here. Oh, I cannot see that at all. Is there any way you can zoom in a little bit for me, please?
Absolutely. Is that better?
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. That's so much better. So hold on, I need to find my sheet. Sorry about this. Give me 2 seconds. Boom. All right.
Noah, would you like him
This
to
is not-
scroll down to your pages? The organizational review form?
I've got that pulled up right here, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see here, there's St. Vincent de Paul is one of the biggest. It's actually it's a very large charity in the U.S. What they're like mostly notable like for doing is doing like the thrift stores. I'm sure a lot of you have shopped at them. That's like most of their volunteer work as well. Is like you can volunteer at the thrift stores and kind of like help out with them. A lot of I know Goodwill does this. St. Vincent de Paul kind of does it, but like you can serve like instead of doing like jury duty or like legal action kind of like cases, you can serve it like a St. Vincent de Paul store instead for like 3 months. I think I've got this page. Can you scroll down for me, please? Thank you. Hard time reading that. Is there any way you can zoom in, please?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which areas?
The pie chart. Yeah, that's good. Like most of St. Vincent de Paul is like philanthropy goes to like the clothing and kind of like just the stuff to like run the thrift stores and all that. Some of the money goes to helping people get back on their feet as well. As you can see, they also do a little bit of transportation. I assume that goes to, I think I saw somewhere it was like they provide buses to unfunded districts for like some sports. See, a little bit of money goes there. All right, that should be most of that covered. A lot of food banks too. The total financials. So not a lot of money is coming from programs or grants. Most of the revenue, about half, is actually coming from the thrift stores, and then a lot of it's coming from contributions as well. Some of the expenses that they take out, as you can see, it's almost all expenses. It is a perfect score as a nonprofit with an 18, so they're taking no money in. Oh, there's my sheet. Yeah. There we go. Perfect 18 and 90.
Excellent.
All right.
Any
Is
questions?
there anything else?
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Here's Isaac Black is up next. Yep.
Okay. Isaac, do you have something that you would like to share, or would you like me just to go ahead and pull up?
Yeah, you can
what
show
I
mine.
have?
Thank you.
Okay. Mhm. Okay. Here we go.
So the nonprofit that I chose was St. Patrick's Center. It is based here in St. Louis City. St. Patrick's Center is basically a ministry of Catholic charities. The purpose of St. Patrick's Center is to transform lives and working to create a community where everyone accesses to sustainable housing, employment, and healthcare. You can go to the next slide. So basically, for the past 40 years, St. Patrick's Center has been. Can you actually zoom in for that? Zoom in. Yeah. Sorry, give me a sec. Actually, I'll put. So sorry. For the past 40 years, St. Patrick's Center has been working with unhoused neighbors and people who are at risk to becoming homeless in St. Louis and the surrounding communities. And basically, they are working to create a community where everyone has access to sustainable housing and employment and healthcare, like I said. And thanks to all the investments, mainly from the government funding, to continue expanding and programming to better meet all of their clients' needs and help transform their lives. Some stats. So 4,462 individuals were served, 74,632 direct services recorded, 813 veterans families served, 453 households helped in finding new housing, 518 households helped to retain housing, 294 average number of days of program enrollment, 102,456 hot meals provided, which is just amazing. Actually, I like these stats; they're very high. You can go to the next slide for me. You can actually skip that one too. Thank you. So the revenue from St. Patrick's Center as $25,888,889, and most of the revenue, like I said, was from government funding, and the expenses were like around 20 million. All of it both basically from program services. Who is helping them with all this, with all their expenses? There's about 3,188 number of volunteers, 34,000 hours volunteered from those volunteered, and basically $1 million value of volunteers, which is very nice. You can go to my my 990 analysis for me. Thank you. So on the 990 form, they scored a perfect 18 out of 18. And that's basically it.